Breaking, Reform UK storms to first place in latest polling. Britain's political map. Redrawn overnight. The political earthquake nobody saw coming just hit Britain. A new YouGov poll shows Reform UK leading at 26%, ahead of both Labour and the Conservatives for the first time in modern history. Nigel Farage isn't just winning anymore, he's reshaping the entire future of British politics. If you want to stay ahead of breaking political news like this, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will change everything. The numbers are staggering. 26% of voters would now opt for Reform UK, with Labour trailing at 23%. This isn't a protest vote anymore. This is a complete rejection of the two-party system that has dominated Britain for decades. Reform continues to poll around 30% in some surveys, with Labour declining into the low 20s. Translation: if an election happened tomorrow, Farage could be moving into Downing Street. But let's break down exactly how we got here. Because this transformation didn't happen overnight, it's been building for months while the political establishment refused to see the warning signs. The establishment is in freefall. Labour, which won a landslide just over a year ago, is watching their support collapse in real time. Keir Starmer's promises of stability have crumbled under economic pressure and policy failures that voters refuse to forgive. The breaking point came with Labour's handling of the economy. Despite inheriting what they called a golden opportunity to reset Britain's direction, inflation remains stubbornly high. Energy bills are crushing working families, and the housing crisis has only gotten worse. Starmer's response? More taxes, more regulations, and more lectures about why ordinary people need to accept sacrifice, while politicians maintain their generous expense accounts. The final straw was Labour's recent immigration policy reversal. After promising controlled immigration during the election campaign, the government quietly increased visa quotas by 15%, while housing costs soar and public services strain under pressure. British voters noticed, and they're furious. The Conservatives, they're finished. Once the party of government, they're now fighting for third place behind a movement that didn't even exist in its current form 5 years ago. Conservative leader Rishi Sunak's attempts to rebuild party credibility have fallen flat. The Tories are still associated with the chaos of Liz Truss's mini-budget, the Boris Johnson scandals, and 14 years of promises that never materialised. Their latest attempt at relevance, a Back to Basics campaign focusing on traditional Conservative values, has been met with eye rolls from voters who remember the party's actual record in government. Internal Conservative polling shows them losing over 200 seats if an election were held today. Some veteran MPs are already quietly exploring job opportunities outside politics. But here's what makes this truly historic. A clear majority would now vote for someone other than the two established main parties. Britain's political fragmentation has reached a tipping point that experts thought was impossible under the Westminster system. Reform's rise isn't happening in a vacuum. The party has exploded to over 230,000 members, making it larger than the Liberal Democrats and growing faster than any political movement in recent British history. These aren't just protest voters or political outsiders. Reform's membership includes former Conservative MPs, ex-Labour councillors, small business owners, teachers, nurses, and military veterans. The party has become a home for anyone frustrated with the status quo. Farage is already preparing his party for power in a general election he predicts could come as soon as 2027, calling the current Labour government a crisis administration. The policy platform driving this surge is clear: controlled immigration, energy independence, and what they call common sense governance. Whether you agree or disagree, millions of Britons are listening. Immigration remains Reform's signature issue, but their appeal now extends far beyond that. The party's energy policy calls for reopening North Sea oil drilling and ending net zero targets that they argue are destroying British industry. On economics, Reform promises massive tax cuts, funded by reducing foreign aid, cutting civil service jobs, and eliminating what they call woke government spending programmes. Healthcare policy focuses on increasing NHS funding while reducing administrative bloat, a message that resonates with voters frustrated by long waiting times. Since the 2024 election, Reform has tried to refashion itself from a protest vote party to one that could govern, and the polling suggests it's working. The party has recruited experienced policy advisors, former civil servants, and business leaders to craft detailed manifestos on everything from defence to education. Reform conferences now feature workshops on governing, not just campaigning. The party is building the infrastructure needed to actually run a government. What we're witnessing isn't just a political shift, it's the potential end of Britain's two-party dominance. The Conservative-Labour duopoly that has defined British politics since 1945 is cracking apart. The last time British politics saw disruption on this scale was the rise of the Labour Party itself in the early 1900s, which eventually replaced the Liberals as one of Britain's two major parties. History suggests these moments of political realignment can happen quickly once they begin. The question is whether reform can maintain momentum long enough to complete the transformation. Inside Westminster, panic is spreading. MPs from both major parties are watching constituencies they thought were safe turn into battlegrounds. Some are already considering their political futures. Labour MPs in traditional working-class seats are particularly vulnerable. Constituencies that have been Labour strongholds for generations are now showing reform ahead in local polling. Conservative MPs in rural areas face a different but equally serious threat. Reform's message on rural issues, from farming regulations to planning restrictions, is resonating with voters who feel ignored by London-based politicians. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. For the first time in decades, sitting MPs from major parties are genuinely scared of losing their seats to an outsider movement. Some are already jumping ship. 3 Labour MPs and 2 Conservative MPs have privately indicated they're considering defecting to reform before the next election, according to Westminster sources. The implications stretch far beyond Britain's borders. A Reform UK government would reshape relationships with Europe, change immigration policy, and potentially alter the entire direction of British foreign policy. Reform's foreign policy platform calls for a more independent Britain, less aligned with EU positions, and more focused on Commonwealth relationships and trade. On defence, the party supports increased military spending, but questions British involvement in overseas conflicts. This could significantly change Britain's role in NATO operations. Trade policy would shift dramatically. Reform promises to prioritise bilateral trade deals with countries outside Europe, potentially including closer economic ties with the United States and Commonwealth nations. Electoral calculus shows a continuing 3-way jostle for the top spot, making it increasingly plausible that Nigel Farage could be the next Prime Minister. The mechanics of British elections make reform's path to power complex but not impossible. Under the first-past-the-post system, the party needs to concentrate support geographically to win seats. Current polling suggests reform is strongest in coastal English constituencies, traditional Labour heartlands in the north, and rural areas where Conservative support has collapsed. If these trends continue, reform could win enough seats to form a coalition government even without an absolute majority. This isn't about left versus right anymore. This is about establishment versus outsider. And right now, the outsiders are winning. The traditional political spectrum has been scrambled. Reform draws support from former Labour voters concerned about immigration and former Conservative voters frustrated with economic decline. Class-based voting patterns that dominated British politics for generations are breaking down. Working-class voters who once automatically supported Labour are increasingly willing to consider reform. Middle-class Conservative voters, particularly those concerned about crime and cultural issues, are also switching allegiance. The old rules don't apply. Traditional campaign strategies, media endorsements, and party machines are being swept aside by a movement that speaks directly to voter frustration. Reform's campaign strategy relies heavily on social media and direct voter contact rather than traditional media channels. The party has built a sophisticated digital operation that reaches voters where they actually spend their time. Celebrity endorsements and newspaper backing, once crucial for political success, matter less when parties can communicate directly with voters through platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. Reform's grassroots organising puts volunteers in local communities rather than relying on top-down campaign strategies from London headquarters. Every major British institution, from the BBC to the Bank of England, is watching nervously as Reform UK builds momentum that shows no signs of slowing down. The BBC faces particular pressure as Reform supporters increasingly view mainstream media as biased against their movement. This could lead to significant changes in how British broadcasting operates. Financial institutions worry about Reform's economic policies, particularly promises to reduce banking regulations and change monetary policy approaches. Civil service unions fear job cuts, promised in Reform manifestos, while environmental groups oppose the party's energy policies. The question isn't whether British politics is changing, it's how fast and whether anyone can stop what Farage has started. Current trends suggest Reform support could continue growing as economic pressures mount and voter dissatisfaction increases. Labour's attempts to win back support through policy changes have failed so far. The party appears trapped between satisfying its traditional base and appealing to reform-leaning voters. Conservative efforts to differentiate themselves from reform have only highlighted how similar their policy positions have become, confusing voters about why they should choose the established party over the insurgent one. The next 6 months will be crucial. If reform maintains these polling levels through the winter, British politics will never be the same. This story is developing rapidly. What do you think? Is Reform UK's rise unstoppable? Or will the establishment find a way to fight back? Drop your predictions in the comments below. And if this kind of breaking political analysis is what you're looking for, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Because the next few months in British politics are going to be absolutely wild. The revolution isn't coming, it's already here.